Maine's top election official ruled last night that Donald Trump is constitutionally ineligible to appear on that state's primary ballot next year, citing his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Shenna Bellows, Maine Secretary of State and a Democrat, said she made her decision after receiving 3 challenges from Maine voters, including former Republican state senators seeking to bar Trump from the ballot.
It's a very detailed decision. We lay out why under Maine law, the Secretary of State has the authority, indeed the obligation, I'm duty bound to make this determination. I laid out that the record demonstrates that, in fact, the events of January 6, 2021, which were unprecedented and tragic, were an insurrection in the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Rick Hassan joins us now. He's an election law expert and director of the Safeguarding Democracy Project at UCLA's Law School. Rick, thank you for being with us. So Maine joins Colorado now in barring Donald Trump from the ballot under the 14th Amendment. The process in Maine, where the Secretary of State determines eligibility, is very different from the process in Colorado, where that was decided by that state's Supreme Court. But through what reasoning and on what judgment do both decisions rest?
Well, you're right that the decision in Maine started administratively, but it's clear it's going to go to the courts and will ultimately be resolved by state courts and maybe the U.S. Supreme Court. The issue in both cases is the same. It's whether Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which bars from future office those office holders who had pledged an oath to support the Constitution, but then engaged in insurrection or supported the U.S.'s enemies, they would be disqualified from serving. And so there's a bunch of legal questions. Does this apply to the president, the office of the president? There's also the question of whether Trump engaged in insurrection. That's more of a factual question. The Secretary of State in Maine pretty much followed the reasoning of the Colorado Supreme Court in the earlier decision in finding that Trump is disqualified from serving in office. It's something that involves complex, novel questions from a part of the Constitution that really was put in place after the Civil War and hasn't been used in recent times.
What about Donald Trump's right to due process? Does it matter that he's not been charged with, tried for, or convicted of insurrection?
It's a great point. I think there are, you can kind of put the questions about this disqualification into 3 buckets. There are legal questions about, for example, whether the presidency is covered by this provision. There are factual questions. Did Trump engage in insurrection? And your question goes to a third point, the procedural questions. This is what upset some of the dissenters in the Colorado decision. Whose decision is it to make? On what basis of evidence? In Colorado, it was a trial court that made the determination without a jury. In Maine, it was the administrator, the chief election officer of the state that made the determination. Is that enough process? I think that's one of the questions, if the Supreme Court takes up this case, that they're going to have to resolve.
Maine's Republican Party is vowing to appeal this ruling, and Maine's GOP chairman says he disputes the idea that a single political elite, that's the phrase that he used referring to the Secretary of State, can disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of Maine voters with one decision. What do you make of that argument? It's less a legal argument and one that speaks to voters' faith in the system.
Right. I do think that there's a difference between the legal question and the political question. Legally, there's a part of the Constitution that says that certain people are disqualified if they've participated in insurrection. That was adopted through a democratic process, and that's part of our set of rules, just like our rules that say that if you're under 35 years old, you can't serve as president, right? So these are rules that were democratically adopted. The application of those rules to the facts could be complex, and having that decision maker be a Secretary of State rather than a jury or some other body is maybe problematic. But I think the broader point is that politically, the question is whether or not this country is going to tolerate having one of the leading candidates for president be taken off the ballot. Whether that's by an administrator or by a court. We're going to see differing decisions across the country. Unless and until we get some resolution from the U.S. Supreme Court, we're going to continue to have these fights in state after state. In some places, Trump might appear on the ballot. In other places, he might not.
And assuming the court takes this up, I hear you say that that is the question that they will weigh. Not necessarily did Donald Trump engage in an insurrection, but what authority, what entity has the right to make that determination and then bar him from the ballot?
I think there are all kinds of questions that have to be raised. There are purely legal questions about the application to the presidency. There are these factual questions, and then there are these procedural questions. Donald Trump really only has to prevail on any one of them in order for the U.S. Supreme Court, to conclude that he remains on the ballot. The challengers have to prevail on all of them. And that's, could be tough, especially because, we don't have a modern track record of how to apply this part of the Constitution. And so it's really anybody's guess what the court's going to do when it addresses these myriad problems. I think one thing that the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, is going to want to do is not have a decision, if the court takes the case, that divides on party lines, which would further inflame partisan passions in the United States.
Rick Hasson, always appreciate your insights. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
Hey, Chapo, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah, I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I was so damn caught on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. What's readiness? What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark. General! General! You need to evac immediately, General. Evac immediately. National security.